The laughter hit her first sharp and cruel as shattered glass against the cacophony of cheerful music and splashing water. For Eudora Hunter, standing at the edge of her own swimming pool in her own backyard, the world narrowed to the mocking face of her husband Richard. He was pointing at her, his voice booming for all his colleagues to hear. "See, I told you, tiger stripes from a battle she definitely lost." The ensuing wave of chuckles was a physical blow stealing the air from her lungs. She looked down at the silvery marks on her stomach, symbols of the daughter she'd carried, now reframed as a badge of failure. In that moment of profound humiliation, she felt utterly alone. She had no idea that the quiet waiter clearing glasses nearby was about to change her life forever. The sun was a merciless hammer in the sky, beating down on the manicured perfection of the Hunters' backyard in Greenwich, Connecticut. It was Richard's kingdom, and today he was its conquering hero. The party was in honor of his promotion to Senior Vice President of Acquisitions at Hunter & Finch, a firm founded by his grandfather and now run by Eudora's own father, Robert. The air was thick with the scent of chlorine, expensive sunscreen, and barbecued steak. Eudora drifted through the crowd, a ghost in her own home. She had orchestrated this entire event, from the artisanal charcuterie boards to the bespoke cocktail menu. She had spent a week ensuring every detail was flawless, a testament to her husband's success. Yet she felt like an imposter. Her simple, tasteful navy one-piece swimsuit felt like armor, but a flimsy one at that. A few years ago, before their daughter Lily was born, Eudora would have been in the center of a gathering like this, not as the host but as a peer. She had been Eudora Graft, a rising star in architectural design known for her innovative and sustainable concepts. Richard had courted her with a relentless charm that masked a deep-seated possessiveness. "You're too brilliant to be working for someone else, Ames," he'd say. "We'll build our own empire. Once we're settled, you can launch your own firm. I'll be your first investor." The promises, like so many things Richard offered, were gilded but hollow. After they married, the settling-in period never ended. Then came Lily, a joyous, all-consuming whirlwind. Eudora's drafting table gathered dust in her home office. Her portfolio became a relic of a past life. Richard's career, however, soared, buoyed by her father's connections and her seamless management of their domestic and social lives. She had become the perfect corporate wife, a role she had never auditioned for but was now playing to perfection. "There you are," slurred Chloe, Richard's younger sister, sidling up to Eudora with a martini in hand. Chloe was a piranha in floral Lily Pulitzer. "Ricky was just looking for you. Don't you look comfortable?" The word hung in the air, dripping with condescension. Eudora forced a smile. "Just making sure everyone has what they need." "Oh, we do," Chloe said, her eyes raking over Eudora's body. "It's just a one-piece at your own party. It's a little maternal." Before Eudora could respond, Richard's voice boomed from the poolside. He was holding court with a group of slick, smiling men in designer swim trunks, the junior executives who worshipped him. He was 3 scotches deep, his face flushed with sun and self-importance. "Ames, honey, come over here," he yelled, waving her over. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She knew this tone. It was his performance voice, the one he used when he needed a prop. Reluctantly, she walked over the hot stone patio, burning the soles of her feet. "Gentlemen," Richard announced, draping a heavy, wet arm around her shoulders. "I was just telling them about my secret to success." He paused for dramatic effect. "A supportive wife. One who handles everything." He squeezed her, his fingers digging into her side. "She even went through a war for me." The men chuckled, confused. One of them, a young analyst named Mark, asked, "What war was that?" "Rich?" Richard grinned, a predator's smile. He lifted the hem of his arm to point directly at the side of her stomach, where the navy fabric couldn't completely hide the faint silvery lines that mapped the history of her pregnancy. And that's when he said it. "See, I told you, tiger stripes from a battle she definitely lost." The laughter wasn't universal. Some of the older men looked uncomfortable, but the younger ones, the sycophants, roared. Chloe cackled the loudest. The sound pierced through the ambient noise of the party, a targeted missile of pure humiliation. Eudora's blood ran cold. The world tilted, the vibrant colors of the party leaching away into a gray haze. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, on the part of her she had been so self-conscious about. These marks weren't a source of shame to her in private. They were a part of her story, a part of bringing Lily into the world. But to have them brandished as a punchline, as a symbol of loss and imperfection by the one person who was supposed to cherish her, it was a betrayal so profound it left her breathless. She looked at Richard. He was basking in the laughter, his chest puffed out. He didn't even look at her, at the woman he had just publicly flayed. He had used her body, the body that gave him a child, as a cheap joke to entertain his subordinates. She wrenched herself from his grasp. Her face was a mask of placid calm, a trick she had learned over years of enduring his smaller private cruelties. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice a stranger's. "I need to check on the catering." She turned and walked away, each step an act of monumental self-control. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She walked with a rigid dignity that defied the firestorm of shame raging inside her. As she passed a small, secluded bar set up under a Japanese maple, the waiter, a young man with intense dark eyes she hadn't noticed before, met her gaze. He wasn't staring at her stomach. He was looking at her face. And in his eyes she saw not pity, but a flicker of something else. Recognition. Empathy. It was a fleeting, silent exchange, but it was the first moment of human connection she had felt all day. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod as she passed, a gesture that said, "I saw that. I heard it, and it was wrong." Eudora continued her retreat, heading not for the kitchen, but for the one place that was still truly hers, the dusty, neglected office at the back of the house. She locked the door behind her, leaned against it, and finally let out the silent scream that had been clawing at her throat. The gilded cage had never felt smaller or more suffocating. The office was cool and dark, a sanctuary of forgotten dreams. Sunlight filtered through the dusty slats of the blinds, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the air. This room smelled of old paper and dried ink, a stark contrast to the cloying sweetness of the party outside. Here, rolled-up blueprints leaned against the wall like fallen soldiers. Her expensive Wacom tablet lay on the desk, its screen dark. This was the tomb of Eudora Graft. She sank into her leather chair, the one she'd bought with her first big commission bonus. The tears came then, hot and silent. They weren't just for the humiliation at the pool. They were for the slow, insidious erosion of her identity, the 1,000 tiny compromises that had led her to this point. She had traded her ambition for Richard's, her voice for his comfort, her dreams for his reality, and her reward was to be mocked for the very sacrifices she had made on the altar of their family. The laughter echoed in her mind, a battle she definitely lost. Had she? She thought of 5-year-old Lily, currently at a sleepover at her cousin's house, blissfully unaware of her parents' fracturing world. She thought of Lily's infectious giggle, the way she would trace the lines on Eudora's stomach and call them Mommy's lightning bolts. No, bringing Lily into the world wasn't a lost battle. It was the only victory that mattered. The battle she had lost was the one for herself. A soft knock on the door startled her. "Go away, Richard," she said, her voice thick. "It's not Richard, ma'am." The voice was quiet, respectful, unfamiliar. She frowned, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "Who is it?" "My name is Leo. I was serving drinks at the party." You left your shawl by the bar." Her shawl. A flimsy silk wrap she'd brought in case the evening turned cool. A pathetic excuse. She wanted to tell him to leave it, to go away, but there was something in his tone, a calm sincerity, that made her get up and unlock the door. It was the waiter from the bar. Leo. Up close, he looked to be in his late 20s, with a sharp intelligence in his dark eyes that seemed out of place with his simple black polo shirt and trousers. He held her silk shawl in one hand. "Thank you," she said, taking it from him. Her voice was still shaky. He didn't leave. He held her gaze, and again she saw that unnerving empathy. What your husband said, there was no excuse for it. The directness of his statement shocked her. No one else had said a word. The other guests had averted their eyes, pretending not to hear. Leo had not only heard, he was acknowledging the injustice of it directly to her. He'd been drinking. She mumbled the automatic defense of a long-suffering spouse. That's a reason, ma'am, not an excuse, Leo replied gently. His eyes flickered for a moment to the blueprints in the corner. Are you an architect? The question was so unexpected, so far removed from the horror of the party, that it took her a second to answer. I was, she said, the past tense hanging heavily in the air. A long time ago. Talent like that doesn't just go away, he said, his voice full of conviction. He then reached into the inner pocket of his jacket, the one he wore over his polo, and pulled out something. It wasn't a napkin or a pen. It was a business card, thick and impossibly elegant, made of a heavy, matte black cardstock. He held it out to her. Eudora stared at it, confused. What is this? My employer was also a guest at the party. She's not one of Mr. Hunter's colleagues. She was invited by your father. She witnessed what happened. He paused, letting the words sink in. She asked me to give this to you. Eudora took the card. The letters were embossed in a simple, striking silver font. Cheryl Rossi, CEO, Aura Global. Below the name was a single phone number and an address in downtown Manhattan. Aura Global. Eudora's heart skipped a beat. She knew that name. Anyone in the design or architectural world knew that name. Aura Global wasn't just a company, it was a legend. They were at the bleeding edge of sustainable architecture, urban planning, and innovative design. They built cities, not just buildings. And Cheryl Rossi was the titan at its helm, a self-made billionaire known for her genius, her fierce business acumen, and her uncanny ability to spot talent. Eudora looked from the card to Leo's face, bewildered. Cheryl Rossi was at my party. Why is she giving me her card? Leo retrieved a small folded note from the same pocket and handed it to her. She also asked me to give you this. Eudora's fingers trembled as she unfolded the note. The handwriting was bold and decisive, a series of sharp, elegant strokes on thick, creamy paper. Miss Hunter, I don't see battle scars. I see the armor of a woman who has built something real, a map of strength, not a sign of defeat. Resilience is the most valuable asset in any leader, and you showed more of it in that single moment of quiet dignity than I've seen in a boardroom in a decade. My assistant Leo found your old online portfolio. The Evergreen Tower concept. It was brilliant 10 years ago. It's revolutionary now. My card is not an offer of pity. It's an invitation. Call me. IR. Eudora read the note twice, then a third time. The words were a balm on the raw wound of her humiliation, a map of strength. The validation was so powerful, so unexpected, that it felt like a physical force pushing the air back into her lungs. Someone had seen her. Not the frumpy wife, not the butt of a joke, but a woman of strength. A professional. Suddenly the door to the office flew open, banging against the wall. Richard stood there, his face a thunderous mask of rage. His eyes darted from Eudora's tear-streaked face to Leo's calm demeanor. "What the hell is going on in here?" he bellowed, his voice slurring slightly. "Who is this guy? Are you crying too? The help, Eudora? Making a scene?" Leo didn't flinch. He simply turned to Richard and said in a perfectly level tone, "I was returning Mrs. Hunter's shawl, sir. I'm leaving now." He gave a slight nod to Eudora, a look of encouragement in his eyes, and then walked past the sputtering Richard and out of the room. Richard's fury now focused entirely on Eudora. "Do you have any idea how that looked? My wife hiding in her office and crying with a waiter while my entire team is outside? You are embarrassing me, Eudora." Eudora looked at him, truly. Looked at him for the first time in a long time, without the fog of love or duty clouding her vision. She saw a weak man, a bully, who inflated his own ego by belittling others. A man who was terrified not that she was hurt, but that her pain might inconvenience him. She clutched the business card and the note in her hand. They felt solid real. A lifeline. "You're right, Richard," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You have been embarrassed." He blinked, taken aback by her tone. "What's that supposed to mean?" She held up the heavy black card. "It means a guest at our party. Someone far more important than any of your yes men saw exactly who you are." His eyes narrowed, trying to read the name on the card from across the room. But Eudora didn't give him the chance. She closed her fist around it, the sharp corners digging into her palm. "I'm done, Richard," she said, the words tasting of freedom. "I'm done being your prop." For the first time all day, Richard looked genuinely scared. He had no idea what she was talking about, but he recognized the shift. The power dynamic in the room in their marriage had just experienced a seismic event, and as he stood there, sputtering, trying to regain control, Eudora knew one thing for certain. She was going to make that call. The 3 days following the party were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Richard swung wildly between feigned contrition and outright threats. One moment he was buying her expensive jewelry she didn't want, murmuring apologies about the scotch and the pressure of the job. The next he was reminding her that their home, their lifestyle, their entire world was funded by his success at her father's company. Aura Global, he'd scoffed when she finally told him about the card. "Eudora, be serious. What are you going to do? Serve them coffee? You haven't designed anything more complex than Lily's birthday invitations in 5 years. It's probably a prank from Chloe." His words were designed to sting, to trigger her deepest insecurities. And they did. Doubt crept in, a cold and familiar poison. Was he right? Was this some elaborate joke? Was Cheryl Rossi just a name? A clever waiter had used to make a point. The business card sat on her nightstand, a black hole of possibility, both terrifying and exhilarating. It was Lily who unknowingly tipped the scales. On the third night, Eudora was tucking her into bed. Lily traced the faint lines on Eudora's hand. "Mommy," she asked, her voice sleepy, "when you grow up, what do you want to be?" The innocent question struck Eudora with the force of a physical blow. To her daughter, she was just Mommy, a fixed entity, a support system, not a person who once had or could still have ambitions of her own. "I used to want to build big, beautiful buildings, sweetie." Eudora whispered, her throat tight. "Like castles, even better." Eudora said, a flicker of the old fire igniting within her. "Buildings that breathe." The next morning, she didn't waver. She dressed not in her usual mom uniform of jeans and a sweater, but in a charcoal gray sheath dress she hadn't worn in years. It was her old armor, the one she wore for client presentations. It still fit. She put on heels. She styled her hair. Looking in the mirror, she saw a ghost of Eudora Graft staring back. The ghost looked tired but determined. She took the train into Manhattan, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels a drumbeat marching her toward an unknown future. The address on the card led to a skyscraper in the heart of the financial district, a monument of twisting steel and cascading green glass that seemed to defy gravity. It was a building Eudora knew well. It was Aura Global's headquarters and one of the most iconic structures built in the last 20 years. It was, in fact, a building that breathed. The lobby was a cathedral of modernism. A 50-foot living wall pulsed with green life, and the air was cool and smelled faintly of rain and earth. Her heels clicked with intimidating loudness on the polished marble floor. At the security desk, she gave her name, expecting to be turned away to be told there was no appointment. "Ms. Hunter," the receptionist said with a warm smile. "We've been expecting you. Ms. Rossi is ready for you. 88th floor." Her heart hammered against her ribs as the elevator ascended with silent, breathtaking speed. The 88th floor opened, not into a reception area, but directly into a sprawling, light-filled space that appeared to be Cheryl Rossi's personal office. It was less of an office and more of a curated ecosystem. One wall was floor-to-ceiling glass with a godlike view of the city. Another was a library filled with books on everything from ancient Roman engineering to quantum physics. And sitting not behind a desk but in a leather armchair near the window was Cheryl Rossi. She was smaller than Eudora had imagined, perhaps in her late 60s, with a mane of silver hair cut in a sharp, elegant bob. She wore a simple, impeccably tailored black dress. Her only jewelry, a striking silver bracelet that looked like a miniature abstract sculpture. Her eyes, magnified slightly by designer glasses, were the sharpest Eudora had ever seen. They missed nothing. Leo, the waiter, stood discreetly near the library wall. He was dressed in a sharp suit, now his role as executive assistant clear. He gave Eudora another one of his subtle, encouraging nods. "Ms. Hunter." "Eudora." "Please sit." Cheryl said, her voice a low, gravelly instrument that commanded attention. She gestured to the chair opposite hers. Eudora sat, her palms sweating. "Ms. Rossi, thank you for seeing me." Let's dispense with the preamble," Cheryl cut in, her tone not unkind, but ruthlessly efficient. "I don't have time for it, and I suspect you're tired of empty pleasantries." "Leo," she nodded to her assistant, "told me you were an architect. He neglected to mention your Evergreen Tower concept won the coveted Prix de Versailles Student Award a decade ago. An award, I might add, that I sponsor." Eudora was stunned. "You know the Evergreen Tower?" "I know it was a concept for a self-sustaining residential tower that was 10 years ahead of its time. It integrated gray water recycling, passive solar design, and a geothermal heating system in a way no one was even considering back then. What happened to that architect, Eudora?" The question was direct, a surgeon's scalpel. "I got married," Eudora said simply. "I had a daughter. Life happened." "Life doesn't happen to people like us, Ms. Hunter. We happen to life," Cheryl countered. "You made choices. You chose to build a family, a home. You chose to support your husband's career. These are not small things. I saw the event you hosted. It was flawless. The logistics alone could rival a small corporate merger. You manage a multi-million-dollar household, a complex social calendar, and are raising a human being. Do not mistake domestic work for lack of skill. It is project management of the highest, most chaotic order." She leaned forward, her gaze intensifying. "At that party I saw two things. First, I saw a man, Richard Hunter, who is a liability. He is arrogant, insecure, and has terrible judgment. The fact that your father Robert can't see that tells me he's getting sentimental in his old age. I will be advising him to audit your husband's entire division." Eudora's eyes widened. This was about more than just a job offer. "Second," Cheryl continued, "I saw you. I saw a woman absorb a disgusting public humiliation with a dignity that was almost terrifying. You didn't crumble, you didn't make a scene. You retreated, consolidated your position, and protected your emotional core. That is not weakness. That is strategic composure. It's what I look for in a leader." She stood and walked over to a large screen on the wall. With a tap, it lit up, displaying the elegant, swirling logo of Hunter & Finch. "This logo," Cheryl said, pointing to it. "It's clean, strong, timeless. Your husband's company has been using it for 12 years. A young, brilliant student at the Yale School of Architecture designed it for a class project. The student's name was Eudora Graft." Eudora felt the floor drop out from beneath her. How did you know that I make it my business to know things?" Cheryl said simply. "Your husband's company, the one he lords over you, is branded with your talent. Your ghost is in their machine, Eudora. The question is, are you ready to step out of the shadows?" Tears welled in Eudora's eyes, but this time they were not tears of shame. They were tears of recognition. This woman, this titan of industry, saw her completely. "The note I sent you," Cheryl said, her voice softening slightly. "It mentioned an invitation. Let me be clear. I am not offering you a job as CEO. That would be foolish. You've been out of the game for years." Eudora's heart sank. "However," Cheryl continued, "I am retiring in 5 years. My board is pressuring me to name a successor. I have candidates, of course. All brilliant. All predictable. I'm not interested in predictable. I'm interested in resilient. I'm interested in revolutionary. She walked back towards Eudora. I am creating a new position. Director of Special Projects reporting directly to me. You will be given a small team and a portfolio of our most challenging forward-thinking concepts. The pay will be more than your husband makes. The work will be grueling. The expectations will be astronomical. Many people in this company will want you to fail. She stopped directly in front of Eudora. If you succeed, you will be on the shortlist to take my chair in 5 years. This is not a guarantee. It is a chance. A fighting chance. The CEO invitation is not for a job today. It's an invitation to a war. The one you were born to win. Eudora looked around the magnificent office at the view of the city she once dreamed of shaping. She thought of Richard's mocking laughter, of Lily's innocent question of the dusty blueprints in her lonely office. Cheryl Rossi wasn't just offering her a job. She was offering Eudora her own life back. When do I start? Eudora asked, her voice clear and strong. Cheryl Rossi smiled, a rare, genuine expression that lit up her entire face. You already have. The first day at Aura Global felt like stepping onto a different planet. The air itself seemed to hum with intellectual energy. People moved with purpose, their conversations a rapid-fire exchange of algorithms, material stress points, and urban planning theory. It was intoxicating and utterly terrifying. Cheryl was true to her word. Eudora was given a sleek minimalist office with a view that rivaled the CEO's. Her title was Director of Special Projects, a designation that was both prestigious and dangerously vague. It made her a target. Her team consisted of 3 people: a young, eager computational designer named Ben, a cynical but brilliant veteran engineer named Maria, and a quiet, hyper-organized researcher named Kenji. They looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and deep suspicion. She was the boss's mysterious pet project. The home front was a different kind of war zone. Richard had exploded when she'd formally accepted the position. You did what he had roared, his face turning a blotchy red. Director of what? Picking out drapes. This is insane, Eudora. You're a mother. Lily needs you. Lily needs a mother who is happy and fulfilled. Not one who is slowly disappearing, she had retorted, amazed at her own newfound steel. I've arranged for a wonderful nanny for the afternoons. My hours will be demanding, but I will be here every morning and every evening. I forbid it. He'd said a statement so archaic it was almost laughable. You don't get to, she'd replied, her voice dangerously quiet. And Richard, you should know. My new boss, Ms. Rossi, is a good friend of my father's. She mentioned she was going to suggest a full audit of your division. Something about your numbers looking creative. The color drained from his face. She had no idea if Cheryl had actually made that call yet, but the threat was enough. It was a checkmate she didn't even know she had. The fight went out of him, replaced by a sullen, simmering resentment. He didn't forbid it again. Her first project was a gauntlet. Cheryl handed her a file labeled The Lazarus Project. It was a proposal to revitalize a derelict, heavily polluted industrial zone on the coast of New Jersey. Dozens of firms had tried and failed. The land was considered toxic, the community was deeply distrustful, and the financial viability was non-existent. It was an impossible task. Everyone thinks this is a wasteland, Cheryl told her in their first project meeting. I think it's a blank canvas. Show me something no one else has seen. The first few weeks were hell. Eudora was drowning. The software had evolved, the terminology had changed, and the sheer pace of the work was staggering. She was rusty, and she knew her team could feel it. Ben would sometimes explain things to her with a patient condescension that made her skin crawl. Maria would openly sigh during her brainstorming sessions. She worked 18-hour days. After tucking Lily into bed, she would retreat to her old office, now her new command center, and study until 2 a.m. Relearning programs, reading up on new material sciences, and analyzing the project's complex environmental reports. She was fueled by coffee fear and a burning desire not to prove Richard wrong but to prove Cheryl Rossi right. The ghost of her past self was a constant companion. She would look at her old designs at the fearless innovation of the Evergreen Tower and wonder where that girl had gone. The humiliation at the pool party became a strange source of fuel. Every time she felt like giving up, she would hear Richard's laugh, see the pitying looks, and a fresh surge of angry determination would propel her forward. Slowly, painfully, things began to shift. One evening, deep into their third week, her team was stuck staring at topographical maps of the toxic land. "It's useless," Maria declared, throwing her pen down. "The contamination is too deep. You can't build on it. You can't even clean it without bankrupting the state." Eudora was staring at the same map, but she wasn't just seeing contamination levels. She was seeing the way the water flowed, the way the sun hit the southern exposures. The old instincts buried for years began to surface. "We're thinking about it backwards," Eudora said suddenly, her voice clear. "We're trying to erase the past of this land. What if we use it?" Ben and Maria looked at her blankly. "Look," she said, grabbing a stylus and sketching on the digital map. "The primary contaminants are heavy metals. Certain types of hyper-accumulating plants like Indian mustard or alpine pennycress can actually pull these metals out of the soil. It's a process called phytoremediation. It's slow, but it's natural." She started sketching faster, the ideas flowing. "We don't build a fancy condo complex. We build a park first, a remediation park. We create a landscape of these specific plants laid out in beautiful geometric patterns. It becomes a public art installation and a massive ecological filter at the same time. We don't hide the healing process. We make it the centerpiece." Kenji, the quiet researcher, suddenly spoke up. "The biomass from those plants would be toxic, containing the heavy metals." "Exactly." Eudora said, her eyes alight. "So we don't compost it. We harvest it and use a process called pyrolysis to turn it into a form of biofuel to power a small on-site energy plant. The energy plant then powers the next phase of development. The project literally feeds itself. It heals the land and uses the poison to create power." She looked at her team. The skepticism in their eyes was gone, replaced by dawning astonishment. Ben was leaning forward, his condescension vanished. Maria had picked up her pen and was already running preliminary calculations. "A park that pays for itself," Maria whispered, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That's insane and brilliant." For the first time since she'd started, Eudora felt the thrill of creation. She wasn't just a director, she was an architect again. The Lazarus Project became her obsession. Her team, now fiercely loyal, worked with a newfound zeal. They fleshed out the idea, creating a multi-phase plan that would transform the toxic wasteland into a thriving, self-sustaining community over a decade. It was audacious, visionary, and financially sound. Meanwhile, Richard's world was contracting. He became sullen and withdrawn. He'd come home late, smelling of stale liquor, and eye her work with a mixture of contempt and fear. The audit at Hunter and Finch was underway, led by a ruthless team her father had hired on Cheryl's recommendation. Rumors were swirling at the firm. One evening, he confronted her in the kitchen as she was sketching on her tablet. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he spat. "Watching my life fall apart while you play at being a big-shot executive." "Your life isn't falling apart because of me, Richard," she said, not looking up from her screen. "It's falling apart because of choices you made. Because you thought no one was watching. That woman Rossi, she has it out for me. She's poisoning your father against me." "Cheryl Rossi doesn't think about you at all," Eudora said calmly. "You are a complete non-entity to her. She is concerned about the health of my father's company, which you seem to have been using as your personal piggy bank." He lunged forward and snatched the tablet from her hands, glaring at the complex schematics of the remediation park. "What is this garbage? A park made of weeds? This is what you abandoned your family for." Eudora stood up slowly, her 5'7" frame seeming to tower over him. "I built a family with you, Richard, and then I saved it from you. Now give me back my tablet." There was a dangerous edge to her voice he had never heard before. He flinched as if struck. Defeated, he slammed the tablet back on the counter and stormed out. 3 weeks later, Eudora presented the Lazarus Project to Cheryl and the executive board of Aura Global. She stood before them, not as a former housewife, but as a visionary architect. She walked them through every phase, her voice confident, her arguments unassailable. She spoke of phytoremediation, not as a science experiment, but as a story of redemption. She showed them not just buildings, but a community rising from its own ashes. When she finished, the room was silent. The board members, a notoriously tough group of old-school engineers and financiers, stared at her. Then the oldest member, a gruff man named Franklin, started to clap. Slowly, deliberately. Then another joined in and another until the entire boardroom was filled with applause. Cheryl Rossi did not clap. She simply watched Eudora, a look of profound, triumphant satisfaction on her face. As the applause died down, she spoke just 2 words. "It's approved." Walking out of that boardroom, Eudora felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a decade. The ghost of Eudora Graft wasn't a ghost anymore. She was sitting in the director's chair holding the blueprints to the future. And she knew with absolute certainty that the battle was far from over, but she was finally wearing her own armor. The approval of the Lazarus Project was not a quiet victory. It was a seismic event within the steel and glass walls of Aura Global. Eudora felt the shift instantly. The project initially whispered about as Rossi's Folly was now the company's flagship initiative, a symbol of audacious innovation. Her title, Director of Special Projects, once a mark of an outsider, now held a new formidable weight. When she walked the halls, conversations no longer stopped in awkward silence. Instead, people met her eyes with a mixture of awe and intense curiosity. The sharp young analysts who once saw her as a corporate curiosity now approached her with genuine questions about bioremediation and sustainable energy grids. Her team, Ben, Maria, and Kenji, transformed from wary subordinates into a tight-knit, fiercely loyal unit of collaborators. Maria, the cynical engineer, now argued with her as an equal, their debates sparking new ideas. Ben's youthful condescension had been replaced by an earnest, almost worshipful respect. They weren't just her team anymore. They were her vanguard. This burgeoning success at work cast the decay at home into stark, grim relief. The sprawling Greenwich house, once a symbol of Richard's triumph, became a mausoleum of their marriage. A suffocating silence replaced the easy chatter that had once filled its rooms. Richard was a ghost haunting its hallways, his presence marked by the scent of stale scotch and unspoken resentment. He would watch her leave in the morning, dressed in her sharp tailored suits, a dark and bitter look in his eyes. He saw the woman she was becoming, and he knew it was a direct reflection of the man he had failed to be. The tension finally snapped on a tempestuous Tuesday night. Rain lashed against the windows, each gust of wind sounding like a mournful sigh. Eudora came home late, soaked and weary from a day of battling zoning commissions to find her father's car in the driveway. A cold dread washed over her. She entered the living room to find Robert Graft sitting rigidly in an armchair, looking ashen and defeated. He had aged a decade since she'd last seen him. On the mahogany coffee table between them lay a thick-bound document with the stark title, Hunter and Finch, Internal Audit Findings. "Dad," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. He looked up, his eyes hollow with a pain that tore at her heart. "I didn't want to believe it, Ames." Robert said, his voice raspy, thick with betrayal. "All these years I treated him like a son. I gave him my trust. I gave him my company. My daughter." His voice broke on the last word. "When Cheryl first called me, I thought she was being dramatic, overly protective of you. But it's all here." He tapped the report with a trembling finger. "He stole millions. A systematic, carefully planned campaign of fraud right under my nose." Eudora sank onto the sofa beside him, the weight of his sorrow pressing down on her. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry I brought him into our lives." "No, he said, his sadness hardening into a cold, unfamiliar anger. "Don't you dare apologize. You are the victim here, not the accomplice. He betrayed us. He used my trust and your love and made a mockery of our entire family. The lawyers are handling it now. They say he'll be lucky to avoid significant prison time." As if summoned by the conversation, the front door opened and Richard stumbled in dripping rainwater onto the pristine oak floor. He stopped dead, his eyes locking onto Robert, then dropping to the damning report on the table. In that instant, the last vestige of his arrogant facade disintegrated. All the bluster, the charm, the carefully constructed superiority evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic cornered man, drenched and defeated. "Robert, I can explain," he stammered, his voice thin and desperate. "Save it for the authorities," Robert snapped, rising to his feet with a sudden imposing authority. "You'll be explaining it to a judge. You are fired, obviously. And I swear to you, Richard, you will not get a single cent from this family that you haven't already stolen." Richard's wild, panicked eyes darted to Eudora, his last hope. This was the moment he always fell back on, the final emotional leverage. "Ames, please," he pleaded, taking a weak step toward her. "Think of Lily. For her. We can't let it end like this. You and me, we're a family. Tell him to stop." Eudora looked at him, at the man she had once loved, the man who had laughed at her scars. She felt nothing but a profound, hollow pity. His appeal to their daughter, once a weapon that could make her yield, was now the very reason for her resolve. She stood up, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. "What about Lily, Richard?" she asked, her voice as cold and clear as the rainy night. "Do you mean I should think about how her father is a thief? That the beautiful home she lives in was paid for with stolen money? What example would I be setting for her if I helped you hide from the consequences of your actions? That it's okay to lie, to steal, to humiliate the people who love you for your own gain?" She took a step closer, her voice dropping to an intense, powerful whisper. "I think about Lily every second of every day. And I've realized that protecting her doesn't mean preserving this broken, dishonest life. It means showing her what strength and integrity look like. It means teaching her that you must always be accountable for what you do. So no, Richard. It ends exactly like this. For Lily's sake." The finality in her voice was absolute. It was not the voice of a woman scorned. It was the voice of a queen passing sentence. He stared at her, finally understanding that the Eudora he could control, the woman he could diminish with a sharp word or a cruel laugh, was gone forever. He sagged against the doorframe, a man utterly broken, a hollowed-out ruin of his own making. The divorce was a legal formality, a clean, swift amputation of a gangrenous limb. Richard, facing criminal charges and stripped of all assets, faded from her life. He moved back to a place and a life she couldn't even picture, becoming a footnote in the story of her and Lily's future. The 5 years that followed were a blur of creation and growth. Eudora didn't just work, she built. The Lazarus Project became a global model for ecological and social renewal. She went on to spearhead the kinetic towers in Tokyo skyscrapers that harvested energy from their own sway, and the Sahara Aquifer Project, a daring plan to combat desertification. She was no longer just an architect. She was a visionary, her name synonymous with the future of sustainable living. Her relationship with Lily blossomed into something beautiful and strong. Lily, now a bright and perceptive 10-year-old, would visit the office, her eyes wide as she looked at the intricate models. One afternoon, Lily came home from school clutching a magazine. She opened it to a glossy multi-page spread featuring an article on the world's most influential architects. There, smiling confidently from the page, was Eudora standing before the now thriving verdant landscape of the Lazarus Project. "My friends didn't believe me," Lily said, her voice filled with a quiet, fierce pride. "That you were the one who built the park that eats poison. You're like a superhero, Mom." In that moment, Eudora felt a wave of love and vindication so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. This was the real victory. Not the accolades, not the title, but the light in her daughter's eyes. The day Cheryl Rossi announced her retirement, the news spread through Aura Global with quiet reverence. The succession plan had been an open secret, a strategy Cheryl had carefully orchestrated for half a decade. The board convened, but the outcome was preordained. A week later, Cheryl summoned Eudora to her office. The late afternoon sun streamed through the panoramic windows, bathing the room in a golden light. The view of the city was as breathtaking as ever, but now it felt different to Eudora. It felt like hers. "It's time, Eudora." Cheryl said, her usual sharp demeanor softened by a proud, genuine smile. "The board's vote was unanimous this morning. The official announcement is tomorrow. The crown is yours." She led Eudora to the great window. "Look at that," she said softly, sweeping her hand across the skyline, where several of Eudora's own creations now stood. 5 years ago, you walked in here carrying the wounds of a battle you thought you'd lost. But you were wrong. That humiliation wasn't your defeat. It was your genesis. It burned away everything that wasn't essential, and it revealed the leader who was there all along. Tears welled in Eudora's eyes as she looked out at the city, a sprawling tapestry of human endeavor. "Thank you, Cheryl," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion too vast for words. "For seeing me when I couldn't even see myself." Cheryl placed a firm, warm hand on her shoulder. "I didn't create you, Eudora. I just opened the door. You were the one who had the courage to walk through it. I saw a leader, yes, but more than that, I saw a survivor. And survivors are the only ones who know how to truly build things that last." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "Now go show them what you can do." As Eudora Hunter, the incoming CEO of Aura Global, stood at that window, the city lights beginning to glitter below like a carpet of fallen stars, the memory of the pool party surfaced one last time. It was no longer a source of pain. It was a foundation stone. She thought of Richard's cruel laughter and saw it for what it was, the desperate noise of a small man terrified by a power in her he could never possess. Her stretch marks, the tiger stripes he had mocked, were indeed from a war. A war to create life, a war to reclaim her own soul. And standing here at the summit of her world, she knew without a shadow of a doubt that it was a war she had gloriously, unequivocally won. That moment of laughter at the pool was meant to break Eudora, to confine her to a narrative of shame. But it became the catalyst for her liberation. Her story is a powerful reminder that our scars, whether visible or invisible, are not weaknesses. They are evidence of our resilience, maps of the battles we have survived. It proves that true strength isn't about having a perfect, unblemished life. It's about having the courage to rebuild, to rise from the ashes of who you were and become who you are destined to be. It's about recognizing that sometimes the most humiliating public moments can trigger the most profound private transformations. If this story of resilience resonated with you, and if you believe in the power of turning pain into purpose, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who might need to hear this message of empowerment. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that inspire and remind us of the incredible strength of the human spirit. Click that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for listening.